All right, so I'm going to go into chapter 5 now, and the way I'm going to do this, I want to go back and show you this picture from before. Now, a couple things about this. Content almost exclusively is one of two things. It's text, so it's words, or it's an image. It's really not much else you can have in there for content when you think about it. All right? Content has got a certain size. Okay? Around the content, you have padding. Now, if you remember, one of the things that we did at the beginning of class is I turned the padding off. And you saw how everything got scrunched together. Well, if I have two different things here, and I'm just making this up. So this is something, and this is something. Okay? Then the area that's in here, so this, let's just say hello. The area that's here, and here, and here, and here, that's my padding. Does that make sense? So if I increase the padding, let's say I add 100 pixels of padding, then what's going to happen is now it'll be about this size, and it'll still say hello. All right? Margin is the area between two elements. So if I change my margin by 100 and don't change anything else, now that'll be over here someplace. Does that make sense? All right. Now, margin and padding are transparent. So you can't set your margin to a certain color. You can't, it's something like that. You can size it, but that's it. Border, which we'll look at in this chapter, is just that. And there are many different kinds of borders. This is a solid border that you see on here. This is green. And it's probably about 5 pixels. You can literally make a border so big that it just looks like a humongous square. It looks terrible. Or you can make it so small that it's very faint. Not only that, the border is actually 4 pieces. You can have a border top. You can have a border bottom. You can have a border right. You can have a border left. If you use just border, it gives you all of them. Guess what? Margin and padding work the same way. You can have margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left. Padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. It's like a clock, too, when we start to put these in here. The first one is the top, 12 o'clock. 3 o'clock is right. 6 o'clock is bottom. 9 o'clock is left. All right? So that's what it is. And basically what it says is this box model, there's a box around everything. So imagine that I've got on the screen, I've got a paragraph that says, "Hi there, how you doing?" There's literally a box around every letter. There's a box around every word. There's a box around every sentence. And there's a box around the entire thing. The reason that that's important is any of those things with a box around them that you choose to put any ID or a class on, you can manipulate using CSS. And that's what the whole thing is about. Now, there's other pictures. There's one that I used to use that I thought was better than this, but they don't have it out online anymore. It was from redmelon.net. It might still be out there. They've moved it, if nothing else. And they showed you this, but it was 3D. So it was kind of cool to see it, what stuff was moving around. It was easier to kind of see what was in there. So if I look at this example, I don't think I've shown you this. If I have, sorry, but I'll just make it quick. So padding in here, if I change the padding on this thing right here from 50 pixels to 150 pixels and run it, is that pretty obvious what padding is by looking at that? All right. And then let's change it back again. In fact, let's make it real small. Let's make it like 10. That's not the way I want to do that. And now there's almost no padding at all, right? Now, if I come through here and I create another div, all right, now I put my original div into another div. Why did I do that? I'm going to show you in just a second. All right, I'm going to grab all of this stuff here. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to paste it in. Now I've got 2 of these. And when I run, you can kind of see. I don't want, it would take too much work, but I want to show you these 2 things here. So pretend there's nothing in the background here, all right? All right. In fact, I guess I could get rid of it. So let's see. I'd have to come in here and this big div here. I could be crummy and put in here style equal, should work, display none. All right. Well, okay, that took everything with it too. Of course I didn't want that. I could figure it out. It would take a couple minutes, and I don't want to waste your time. But the point is, now I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say instead of margin 20 pixels, I'm going to say margin 100 pixels. And you can see there is now 100 pixels of margin between these two elements. If you get that, there's not a lot more to this. All right? Now, the way that you use it, of course, there's a lot more to it, but I'm talking about conceptually. If you understand what's going on, that is an introduction to the box model. They'll show you a page that illustrates. I think it's more confusing for some of the stuff that they talk about in here. All right? But we will talk about heights, margin, and padding, and I just showed you a demo. Like I said, this isn't a super long chapter. So this is their diagram. It's a little bit more heavy, so to speak. But notice, this right here is a top margin. That's a left margin. That's a right margin. That's a bottom margin. All right? This is a top border. That's a left border. That's a right border. That's a bottom border. This is top padding or padding top, padding bottom, padding left, and padding right. You can use all of these or any combination or none of them. So when we first started on Monday, we didn't look at CSS. We had just content. Any margin, any padding was put by the browser, not by me. We just used the default stuff. And today I showed you how to even turn that off. All right. Now, they talk in here about this formula for calculating the height of a box. What are they talking about? This is the box model. So this is the thing right here. All right. And notice what it says. It's the top margin plus the top border plus this, etc. So they show you how you can figure out the height, and they show you how you can figure out the width. One thing to realize is, let's suppose that this thing in here, right in here, is 100 pixels wide. Are you with me? So where it says this is the content area, etc., that's 100 pixels wide. Well, the whole thing isn't 100 pixels anymore. Because if it was 20 pixels here and 20 pixels here, it's now 140 pixels. Does that make sense? So when you are figuring out these sizes, all right, you've got to take all of that into account. There's also something that we'll look at in just a bit that's called border box that will automate some of it for you. All right. So the box model lets you work with boxes the browser places around each element. By default, they're as wide as the block and as tall as it needs to be to hold the content. You can use height and width to manipulate that any way you want to or need to do so. So they show you this picture, and like I said, I don't know if you'll find that. I found that picture kind of irritating myself, the one that's in the book here on the bottom of page 171. But it does show you a few things. First of all, there's a solid border. There's like a dotted border. There's dashed borders. You can make the borders any color you want, etc. So again, if we had just set, let's say here, for this one that you see, this thick one, if we had just set it border top, this wouldn't be there, this wouldn't be there, and that wouldn't be there. So you can get some effects by just setting one of them. All right. Also, and you're going to see this in just a minute. So let's say that I said right here, I don't even care what it is. Let's just say we had a div. All right. And I said in here, padding. If I want the padding to be different on all four of these, I have to give each one of them a number. All right, so let's say I use pixels. So I'll say 10 pixels, 20 pixels, 30 pixels, 40 pixels. What that means is I want, the first one is always the top. So I want 10 pixels of padding on the top. The third one is the bottom. So I want 30 pixels on the bottom. The next one, this one here, that's on the right. And the last one is on the left. Now, most of the time, you don't want a different number in each one of these. You might, but most of the time you don't. So let's just assume for a second that I wanted 40 pixels all the way around. Then all I have to say is padding 40 pixels. And that means I want 40 top, right, bottom, left. All right, if I only put two numbers in here, so let's say I put 20 pixels here, no comma in there. That means top and bottom. That means right and left. So there are shortcuts. Now, if that confuses you, you can list each one out separately. So I could have said here, padding hyphen top, 40 pixels. Then underneath it, padding hyphen bottom, 40 pixels. You could do it like that too. But there are shortcuts, and margins work exactly the same way as what I just showed you here for padding. So most of the time, people use the shortcuts. Right? I mean, if you keep listing everything, the good news about listing everything is while you're learning, you can really see what it all is. You've got it all laid out. The bad news is your CSS files start to get really big. All right, you kind of start getting some code bloat with those. So they show in here this, they get this by doing this. All right, so you'll notice 2 pixels solid black. That's this. 2 pixels solid black right there. That's the one around this thing here. Then they got another one here, dotted black. That's probably this one right here. All right. And when you're setting this stuff up, you'll notice if I come back into our code here, and let's just say, I'll say around each paragraph, I want a border. All right. And typically, I don't think in this one the order matters. So I'm going to say 3 pixels. Now notice if I say solid, for example, and I say orange. Again, this might look just hellacious with pink in there, etc. But it's more that you get the idea. All right, there's that orange border around there. All right, let's use a different color so that it really stands out. Let's just use black. So I'll use our color combination. All right, so you can really see it. And again, the thicker that you make it, the chunkier, etc., it's going to look. So if I change that to, let's just say 15 pixels. In fact, there's 16 pixels in a rem, so I'll just say a rem here. You can see how much it changes. All right. And again, when you do this, all right, that was for all paragraphs. And notice that it even worked on our custom para because it is a paragraph, right? So it still worked on there. I'm going to cut that back down. I'm just going to make it, I'll make it 3 pixels. But if I only want, let's just say a top border for whatever reason, I'm going to put here border top. Save it. All right. And I don't know how I got that in there, but I did. Now you'll notice there's just a top border on each one of these. So you can customize these any way you want to or need to customize them. All right. How to size and space elements, heights and widths. This gets to be a little confusing. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'd like you to take a quick look at it for a second, please. This is on page 173 in your text. You'll notice they all say a relative or absolute, meaning you can use pixels, you can use rems, you can use percentages, etc. All right? Width and height probably make sense. What about the rest of these? All right, notice min width. the area will always be at least this wide regardless of the content. So if you wanted to make sure you couldn't shrink it down past a certain amount, you could set the min width. Now, min height max width is one that a lot of times people set. Okay? And it says you can also specify none to say there is no maximum width. Well, a lot of times what people will do is they'll set max width to like 100%, which means use the area I have, but no more. And that you can use some of this stuff to like scale your images and the like, and you'll see that as we go on in here. And height works the same way, except instead of the width, it's working with a height. And again, they show some examples in here. The only way you're going to learn this is to play with it. You're not going to learn by me going over examples and lecturing to you. All right. So if nothing else, you're going to have some time because, when I finish this, this is going to be it for the day, and we're going to have at least probably close to an hour left. All right. Start bringing some of this stuff in. I want it to make sense to you. And again, that's the best way to learn. So margins I've already mentioned to you. Again, notice top right, bottom left. And again, as I mentioned, it's like a clock. All right. Or you can just do margins. Now, if you do 3 of them, I never remember this one because I never use it. But I told you just one of them means all 4 sides. 2 of them mean the first number is the top and bottom. The second number is the left and right. 4 of them individually ones, but 3 of them means top. The middle one is left and right, and that one's the bottom. I'm sorry, I find that too confusing. All right, so I either do all of them or 2 of them. That's about the only ones that I use. All right, I'm not saying that's going to be the way it is for you. I'm telling you that's the way it is for me. Now, the way that this stuff works in HTML, this is an important concept right here. This thing that I'm kind of making in bad blue. It says if you specify a bottom margin so if you've got 2 things that are here. So let's just say I've got something here and I've got something here. You with me? And I specify this has a bottom margin of 20 pixels and this has a top margin of 30 pixels. It'll collapse. It'll grab the bigger one. It won't put 50 pixels in there. It'll grab the bigger one and it'll make it 30 pixels. It's like that one didn't even exist. All right, and that's what they're mentioning on this thing that's in blue here. So, well, geez, that's not what I wanted. Well, then you make that one 50 pixels and you don't worry about that one. So there's always ways around everything. All right. You can specify auto, as it says, to help with centering. That doesn't always work, but it works most of the time. Padding, again, works the same way that we just saw for margin. But remember, whereas margin is the stuff between elements, padding is the stuff within the element. And it's hard. Sometimes why didn't it look the way I wanted? Because you use padding when you meant to use margin or vice versa. I'd say that's one of the biggest mistakes people make, not just beginning developers, any developer. All right, so they give you this web page, as it says, that illustrates sizing and spacing. So you'll notice that with what they're doing here, they're starting to get a little bit more complex. What do I mean? Well, notice they've floated their image. They've used some text shadow. They've got an unordered list. All right. Personally, I might have made that an ordered list, but maybe they just think the dots look better. Cool. All right. They've got a footer in here. They're using a character entity. All right. So again, all of that stuff is in here, and they give you all of the code. Now, again, I still have to go and grab that. I'm going to try to do that by the end of the period today. But they give you will have this. All right. There's all the CSS. And they even show you what the new stuff is in here that we haven't talked about before. So notice the body, they put a width in here. Margin, 1M auto. What does that mean? That means 1M on the top and bottom, center the left and right. All right. This means by default, put no padding on any of these, etc. I'll let you read those yourselves. All right. All right. A version of CSS that uses a reset selector. Well, hopefully at least you all understand now what a reset selector is, because I showed you 3 ways of doing it. We did the universal selector at the beginning of class. Then I showed you the normalized.css, which they use in this book. And I also showed you the Eric Meyer reset. All right. So there's a universal one right there. Setting borders and backgrounds, we talked a little bit about this already. And as I mentioned, there's different things you can do with borders. All right. And this is kind of like the ones that I showed you here. And I thought they had a picture in here where they did a bunch of them, but maybe I'm wrong. This is kind of cool. The border and border radius property. What the border radius does is it takes things and it rounds them. All right. If you remember, I'm just going to put something in here. Please don't let this worry you if you don't know what I'm doing. But I'm going to come in here and let's see, back in here. I did this before. I'm going to very quickly add a form. Whoops. Add a form. And I'm going to put in here just to make it really, really simple. I don't know if it was the value equal submit. All right, let's see if it did what I wanted it to do. All right, so there's the submit button. Pretty obvious. It's not going to do anything. I don't want it to do anything. I don't care. But what I am going to do is I'm going to jump into my CSS. And in fact, why? Because we know how to do this now. All right, so I can say type equal value equals. I'm going to say here ID equals submit BTN. You don't have to do that, but I'm just adding an ID to it. So I have something. All right, because I'm trying to use these concepts that we've been talking about. So ID, hashtag, submit button, which is the name. And I'm going to say border radius, and I'll say 5 pixels. Now, I haven't saved yet. Did you all hear me? Because I want you to see this. That's what the button looks like right now. You may or may not be able to tell, but pretty much the ends are all squared off. All right. Now I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to do a file, save all, and now I'm going to go back to it again, and you can see it's been rounded. That's what's really in vogue today when you start to really create nice looking websites. Now, I'm going to show you something. You're never going to do this, but I just want to show it to you. All right. And that is, notice I just put 5 pixels in there. The bigger the number, the more round it's going to be. That should just make, hopefully at least that just makes sense to you. But if I come through here and say this, 50%. Now when you look at it, buttons won't allow themselves to become completely circular. But if you do that with an image, the image is now perfectly round. If that's indeed what, for some reason, you wanted to do that. All right. And they show you some, notice what they have here. They've only played with one corner. So this is supposed to, I don't know if it's supposed to be a button or what, but they do some borders around it. They also do a border radius, but not on everything, and they put a shadow on it. So showing you can combine all that stuff together if you want to or need to do so. How to set background colors and images. Well, we've been doing a lot with background color already. Now, background image, the reason that this is important, not so much anymore, but what some companies do is they might have their logo in a really, really light color, and they might put that as the background of each page on their website. All right? You said nobody do that. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Now, there's a difference because when it's background image, it's there. You typically don't do as much CSS on it as you would a, quote, real image, unquote. All right? And when you do that, well, by default, I used to use this background image. Remember the little yellow smiley guy that they had with the two eyes and then the smile? All right? Well, I used to do that for people, and it was a little thumbnail. By default, it repeated. So when you brought it up on the screen, there were about 1,000 of them up there. So you've got your choice. You can say no repeat, which means only put it there once. Repeat X, which repeats it just vertically. Repeat Y, which just repeats it, I think that's right, horizontally. And you can do, or you can do just repeat, which means put it in there as many times as you can. You can also position it on the page. Left, right, center, etc. So they show all that stuff in here. How do you put it in to begin with? All right, notice what you have here. This is kind of important. So notice they got background blue here. And I don't care about that, but I care about this. Usually when you put this in, this is saying I want texture.gif to be my whole background. But a lot of times when you put that in, the background, you think it's going to take up 100%, and it takes up 90%. So what you'll oftentimes see a color in there like that, which means, hey, anywhere that the background can't show, use that color as the background. All right. So again, there's the repeat, which means up and down as much as you can. Repeat X. Did I say it wrong? I always forget my X and Y's. But repeat horizontally, repeat vertically, don't repeat at all. All right. Notice where you can position things. Now, in a computer, I don't know about you guys, but I was always taught, let's see. I'm going to put in here images. Okay, I was always taught that that is the point of origin, right there, right where I am, right? Makes sense, correct? No, so you think on here, it would be somewhere in here in the middle. No, when you are working with a program, the upper left corner is 0, 0. All right? And as you start going up, you're going right and you're going down. All right? So, I mean, it's a little bit different than what you might be used to. Now, it says here, don't use a background color image that makes text over it difficult to read. All right? Probably you haven't heard this. Probably you have. I've got a brother. I've got actually 3 brothers, but my oldest brother is colorblind. In fact, they didn't let him in the Navy for almost a year because he had to do stuff to prove that he could see in certain colors. 10% of the world population, it's estimated, is colorblind. So if I use a real light pastel background color for my background and I make my text a light pastel color, it's going to be hard, if not impossible, for someone like him to read it. That's why still the best colors to use are a white background with black text, because it's got the most contrast. But it's also the least aesthetic to look at. All right? So that's what they're saying here. How to use gradients. Well, if you've never seen a gradient before, a gradient is when you morph from one color to another. All right? It really is a morphing. All right? Years ago, one of my favorite things, somebody sent me this. I don't remember who. I wish I had kept it. They said, hey, when I saw this, I thought of you. Now, when my kids were little, they're all 2 are in their 30s and one's in their 20s now. But when my kids were little, they just drove me nuts by watching Barney the dinosaur. All right? Well, they had a morph that went from Barney to Hitler. And I have to admit that I loved it. All right? But that's morphing people. Here you're morphing colors. And when you morph colors, you can have an extreme. We could morph from white to black or black to white. You can also morph left to right to left, top to bottom to top, or diagonally. All right. In fact, they're going to show an example at the end of this chapter where they've got a gradient in there. All right. Now, with some of this stuff, you can tell I'm spending more time on than others. Is it possible that you will have on your test that you will have a thing with gradients? Yeah. I'm not saying it isn't, but you shouldn't go nuts with it either. You just turn to that page in the book and you do something like that. All right. So the last one they have you build is this. So let's notice a few things. First, you notice they have a div or something where they've got a container here. All right? And they have a gradient here. Other than that, it's pretty much the same one they looked at before. They do have a horizontal rule right here, but it's pretty much the same as what we've looked at previously. All right? And I know one of you asked me, I don't remember who, but we were talking before about, let's see, I think they have the HTML in here, but let's see. No, I guess it's the same HTML as the last one. All right? But the idea is they'll start to show in here breaking stuff up into a main, and under main they'll have sections and articles and whatever. All right? So I'm done lecturing for today, but what I'd like to do, come on, tomorrow is, like I said, go over chapter 6, which is how to use CSS for layout. Some of the stuff is unbelievably almost easy to do, just putting in a couple of commands. Some of it is more difficult. All right. And I mean, as an example, let's see, just so you can know what I'm talking about. If I go in and let's say that I create a document and I put 5 paragraphs in there. Okay. If I go in and say, for example, column count, and I say 3, it puts them into 3 columns. Does that make sense? So that's one of the things that we'll look at. And like I said, it's not difficult at all to do. So we'll go through that one tomorrow, and then we'll go through chapter 7. 7 will be good because we've had a lot of the stuff already, but it's looking, now you will learn in that chapter how to actually go, like I showed you when I made the star for the unordered list. They show you how to do all that stuff. All right. So they talk about it in more depth and breadth of coverage. So I imagine tomorrow's will take about the same amount of time as today. Friday, we'll go over chapter 8, which is a medium-sized chapter, but we're going to start learning how to make stuff look nice as you shrink your screen size. All right. And if we can get through all of that by today, or by Friday, I should say, by Friday, then between Friday and Monday, we will have 2 different tests, not graded. You won't turn them in, but so you can have an idea of how you're doing. And then Tuesday of next week, we'd have a test. All right. And then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week, just so you know, we're only going to go over 2 chapters, 9 and 10. All right. And 9 is on what's called Flexbox. That's the newest way to lay things out on the screen, but it's done in a 2-dimensional manner. And chapter 10 is on CSS Grid, which is often used in conjunction with Flexbox to lay it out in a 3D type of manner. So we'll do that. And if we can get that far by the end of next week, that's great. Like I said, the goal is by the end of week 4 to be done with this book so we can concentrate a lot on the other book. You're going to get a lot more JavaScript than the last class did. All right, and I think that's going to do nothing but help you as we go on. All right. So one thing that I'm going to send to you right now so you have it is, where is it? For every chapter, let me do this. That is, remember that if you are interested in that study group, then talk to other people. If there's no interest, I have tried. They meaning the people here, Ms. Bruggeman, I'm not going to say she's like pushing it on us, but they have done studies and they found out that by and large, people do better when they have a study group. Now, what you don't want to have happen is you don't want the smartest person in the group, or the one, I shouldn't even say the smartest, the one who gets it the best, to just take over and become another teacher. The idea is in a study group, you can ask any question where you might feel in class, I don't want to ask that because I'm just afraid what people will think I'm dumb or whatever. I've always said, there really is no such thing as a dumb question. And I always remember when I was at the school I used to be at, there was a young lady who raised her hand and asked a question. I don't remember what it was. And I thought, well, I'm wrong. There is such a thing as a dumb question. I didn't say it, but I didn't roll my eyes, but I thought, wow. Because we were like almost through the semester and she asked a question that got answered the first day. And it was more amazement than anything else. All right. All right. So you will be getting sent all this stuff. So for every chapter, you will have both um, labs and homeworks. All right. And we'll be going over what they are, how you do them, etc. And what's going to happen, I've already got this, I just haven't put it out there, is you're going to have a thing out here that says, it's got this. Let me close this. Come on. There we go. And it'll have, no notice, examples, homework, labs. Now, guess what? There's nothing in any of these. This is where you will store your homework. All right? What we're going to do is maybe we'll do the first homework assignment together, store it, push it up to GitHub, and then I'll show you how you give me an invite so that I can grade it. Does that make sense? Every test you take is going to be under tests. I don't want you, I mean, we've gone through this stuff, and you guys know this, that I've had people, oh yeah, I sent it to you, and then they didn't. That's why typically when we have a test, hell, if you're done in 2 hours for the test, that's fine. I'm supposed to remind you. Someone who shall remain nameless reminded me of this yesterday. If you finish a test, so let's say we take a test Tuesday, and you're done at 9:30. You don't go home then. All right? Also, because a couple of you did it yesterday, even if we're done at 11:50, you're not supposed to walk out till 11:55. These are Rankin's rules. These are not Jeff's rules. At the campus that I worked at in Wisconsin, it was very lax. All right? But then again, you know, I still talk about the picture. There was a woman who came in one day. She was one of my students. She's a nice person, about 5 feet tall and 300 pounds. All right? She had no bra on. She had an undershirt on with holes in it. All right? And shorts with holes in them. Now, imagine how that would play here. Not very well. All right? But the school never said anything, and I wasn't supposed to say anything because that was their right. So every place is different. So you should hopefully have all this stuff by tomorrow morning. But hopefully, you know, you've got an hour now. You can at least practice, play with it, etc. And if nothing else, well, I did all that. Then take a look at 6 and 7 that we're going to go through tomorrow, and even 8 that we'll go through on Friday. All right. Then if you've got any questions, I can take them as, you know, we're going in class. And tomorrow, when we start, if you looked at something and it doesn't make sense, ask. You know, Nick brought that up yesterday when I screwed up the favicon. I like stuff like that. I don't like screwing up, but I like that, you know, somebody took the wherewithal and the initiative to look it up. And what I should mention that to you too. I should say this. Everything you said yesterday was right, but I wanted to say, and I'll end with this, I promise. If you remember yesterday, we did this where we said online, or what was it, free online favicon generator. Remember this from yesterday? This is the one we used. Now, if I just been smart enough that when we grab that one, and I grab this, I'll go in again and just do it like I did it yesterday. All right, so I'll go to the desktop, go to my website, 02, go to images, go to my puppy. In fact, let's do the other puppy 2. All right, so I've got all that. Okay, everything's cool. That's all set. I click Create Favicon. Great. You can just copy in those 2 lines. If I would have done that, I wouldn't have gotten any error. And much of the time, when you go and use a product, it'll say, now, this is what you do with it. I didn't read that far ahead. Shame on me. But I'm just telling you. I did it the way they showed it in the book. We still got it to work with Nick's help, but that works just fine there's no question marks or anything in there. Okay? All right. So again, we'll pick it up, do 6 and 7 tomorrow then.